the chat. Welcome to the Utah State Board of Education Law and Licensing Committee meeting for this beautiful June month. And when we're finally getting closer to normal, it's so good to see you. And thanks especially to those of you staff members who are attending and also the public, any members of the public who are attending. It's really great that you have an interest in public education. So thank you so much. My name is Carol Lear, and I'll be chairing this meeting. We have the other board members, and I do this every time, but I think there might be new people listening in, and it always helps to hear your voices and know you're there. So will you please introduce yourselves? Vice Chair, please, Randy.
Hi, I'm Randy Booth, and I'm representing District 13. So I have Nebo School District and Provo School District. And actually, I'm trying hard to represent all of the children and parents of the state. So excited to be here this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. Matt, are you?
Yes, thank you. Matt Hymas. I represent District 3, which includes West Valley, so part of, and Magna, which so part of Granite School District, also Tooele School District, and Juab School District, or Juab County and Tooele County. So thank you.
Thank you. Natalie. Member Klein? Cindy?
Hello, Cindy Davis. I represent District 9 and also hopefully all kids in Utah, and I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you. And Member Klein? Natalie? She may have just stepped away. We also have board member, there she is. Natalie, introduce yourself, please. Natalie? Oh, well.
Chair, would you like me to text her? She may be having technical difficulties.
Yeah, I show that her computer is, that she's muted for some reason. So yes, that'd be great. Thank you. And we'll get started. I think the introductions were also helpful because this meeting could be embarrassingly short. So if we added another 3 minutes, that's really good. Our first item is a waiver request, a waiver renewal actually, and was very professionally handled by AAG Michelle Buse, and I see her on. So Michelle, would you like to explain this request to us?
Sure. I'd like to recognize from the school, their school director, Renee Edwards. She's here at the meeting as well. So if you have any questions. This renewal request, just so you know, there are 4 early college high schools that have similar requests, and it feels like you're getting a lot because they're all 4 due at the same time. But there are only 4 of these in the whole entire state. So although it feels like a lot, please know it's very limited actually into 2 unique situations. Itinerant Early College High School is set up to allow students to earn their associate's degree by working with Salt Lake Community College, and they allow the students to go to both high school classes and college classes. The first request for waiver is that they waive partial half a credit for PE and health and half a credit in the arts so that their schedule will match what the associate's degree requirements are from the university level and make it easier for the students to get their schedule in line with what the university schedule is. The second request that they have is a waiver of the 180 days. And the reason that they have asked for the waiver of the 180 days is so that they can align their schedule with the university schedule so that when the college classes end, the students' high school classes end as well. And then the students, they have 90% of their, 2/3 of their juniors and sophomores take summer courses at the colleges. So the summer courses would start before the traditional school year would end usually. And so in order for them to give the kids a break, and let them end their high school classes at the same time that their college classes end. They would like to align their calendar with the university. They included a copy of their calendar. I've looked at the previous schools and they were still running in the 170s days when they counted and aligned it with the university. So it's not a lot of days that they're missing, and they are not missing any hours. They have over 1,000 hours, 1,078.
This is board member Klein. Are we waiting for something specific?
Oh, no, actually, we just went ahead because we thought you were having technical problems. So we're just discussing item number.
Is anybody there?
All right, can you hear me?
Carol, I'm going to call her.
Okay. I'm sorry, Michelle.
No, that's okay. I hate to have her miss it.
Cindy
But,
still has questions if she has them. but-
Okay, I will go ahead and proceed. The school, in addition to providing their schedule, they provided student achievement data, and the student achievement data reflects that over the past 6 years, they've either held steady or increased their graduation rates every year. Until last year, it was at 99% of their high school seniors graduated. They have about 90% of their students who are enrolled taking college courses. So they have a very high percentage of their students that are involved in college courses. Their ACT rates average between 22 and 23, which is above the state average and the national average. So their achievement scores and graduation rate is stellar, commendable. And it appears that the schedule that they're currently on is working well for the goals of their charter. So with that, I will turn it over to you as a committee to discuss. And if you have questions, Ms. Edwards is here and can assist in answering those questions as well.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Renee, for being here and willing to answer questions. Do any committee members have questions of either AAG Buse or Director Edwards? I'm looking, Cindy's on the phone, helping Natalie. Member Booth.
Thank you, Chair Lear. I was just interested in knowing if, as part of the course requirements for their associates, if they're taking college courses in physical education or in the arts at all, that might make up for this waiver that we're doing here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the question. They do take art at the college level, and some of them choose to take the PE class. They don't have a PE class offered through concurrent enrollment. Some of them take that as part of their degree plan. Where we're finding that students are having difficulty is we start in 10th grade. So if they don't have art or their PE in 9th grade, then they're having to make that up in addition to what we offer in our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade program. We don't have a lot of students replacing that art. We have more replacing the PE, and it's really because some of the schools that the students come from when they arrive here, for whatever reason, haven't had that PE requirement. So essentially, like, they would require them to take more PE at the college level because we offer the 10th grade piece here.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for that answer. And I have kind of a follow-up to that, Renee, if that's okay.
Sure.
Do you have any idea? I really think that PE is there's a reason it's in the graduation requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And if the students are somehow getting a PE experience or of any kind other than through school, that would be great. I'm just looking to know if you know anecdotally if they are doing that, how many ask, if any, for a competency credit for that? Do you know, even anecdotally, if that happens with students?
You know, we have a few that participate in sports that we work with our local districts that they track hours. And so we do like a credit replacement and more of like a competency based. We put all of our sophomores through our PE program. We think it's really valuable for them to have time to our PE is, we don't have a gym, so they do have to track things on their own for cardio, but we get them outside, we do walks, we, do activities, we talk about just mental health and wellness and other things that are so important. And then their junior, senior year, like I said, some of them can take that college piece where they choose something. So we do probably have, I'd say, maybe about 10% that earn that credit a different way. Again, what we find is they come in ninth grade not having it at all, and they're trying to play catch up.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Do you have any athletic teams, sports teams at all at your school?
We just started esports. Apparently, it's a
Oh.
it's a sport, but no, we don't participate in athletics ourselves. Although, as you know, students at charters can go to their boundary schools, and we do have students who a wide gamut. We have football players, track, basketball, volleyball. So
Good. Okay. I was just curious how they were getting that. I don't. I just like those kinds of credits in high school. I guess I'm an old school educator, and I just think you may never learn to jump rope like I did in 8th grade if you don't have a wonderful teacher like Mrs. Davis who made us do jump rope very regularly.
Absolutely. So, I totally agree. I think getting up and getting yourself moving is important, and making sure that you're staying healthy.
Member Booth.
Chair Lear, I have a motion if you're ready for it.
You are. I don't see any other hands. Thank you.
I move that the committee forward a recommendation to the board to renew the waiver of certain requirements in R277-419 and R277-700 for itinerant early college high school.
And do you have any need to speak further to that motion?
I do not.
Okay. The motion is the committee forward a recommendation to the board to renew the waiver of certain requirements in R277-419 and 277-700 for itinerant early college high school. Any further? Oh, Member Davis, who was otherwise, would you like to comment, please?
I would just like to speak to the motion and just an appreciation. I have had some folks asked me since we've been working on this waiver rule with days and said, it would be better if you had a waiver for either the 180 days or the 990 hours. We've only addressed the days in our current, year-long waiver. So I really appreciate that you brought in that you still meet the 990-hour requirement, even though it wasn't actually in the language for this year. I think it should be in future years personally, but thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for noting that. And I repeated the motion. So if the committee members would like to vote, please. And I see that it's unanimous. Thanks so much. Excuse me. The second item on the agenda, item 2.2, is an action item. It is just a request to repeal a rule R277-503, licensing routes. Ben Rasmussen, would you like to tell us about this item?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. This rule is approaching its 5-year review. At the same time, by its own terms, it was set to sunset on June 30th, 2020, but we need an affirmative action by the board to repeal the rule at this time. So the subject matter that this rule covered has already been incorporated in the 300 rules, and so it just is no longer needed.
Thank you. Does any committee member have a question or any comments related to this? I don't see any. Oh, I do see. Member Hymas.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Oh, please do that.
I move that the committee repeal R277-503 on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading.
Any discussion to that motion?
No.
Thank you. The motion is the committee repeal on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading. No further thoughts? Will the committee members please vote? And I see everyone's voted and it's unanimous. Thank you. On to the next item, which is a proposed new rule. Item 2.3 R277503. Excuse me. Ben Rasmussen, would you take this as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this rule is meant to establish how the board would distribute money that's been allocated for LEAs to acquire English language learner software. This is a new rule, and basically staff is proposing a two-tiered approach to allocating this money. The first is that LEAs would receive a base amount that would be consistent with the table you've seen near the on lines 37 through 50. And then after they receive that base amount, the remaining funds available would be distributed to the LEA based on the number of students they have on a per student basis. So that's set forth here in this rule. We have Melanie Durfee and Todd Call, who can answer your questions on this program and how they plan to work these procedures, and we can go from there.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members about this, Mr. Hymas?
Yeah, whenever I hear a new rule, I think new or more paperwork. Can you just speak to what the reporting is going to look like on this? Is it hopefully can be absorbed? I don't know. I don't want to go further into it. I just hopefully I can get an idea of what this new rule will do. Not necessarily for our LEAs, I can see that, but what is it going to do to their paperwork load or their reporting load?
Maybe Mr. Call, or I forget who else it was.
Melanie Durfee.
Yes, one of you, would you like to speak to that?
I don't think any of them are on. They
Oh,
have difficulty getting in. I know Melanie had the invite, but she had difficulty yesterday joining as well. So I'm going to speak and they're going to text me if I get something wrong. So basically the main purpose of this rule was just legislation. We had some code language that said do this base formula. We had to come up with what the base formula was. So this puts it into rule so that is clearly communicated to the board as well as the stakeholders. In terms of reporting, it doesn't change anything. This past year, they had to apply in Utah grants for their funding. They submit their reimbursement once they purchase the software that they choose, and that's it. So it's really just a Utah grants piece that they are required to submit their requests for dollars and then to submit their reimbursement when they're ready to be reimbursed for the cost of the software.
And if I may add, Chair, I think this would be most of the burden here would be on the USBE staff side. If you look at how the rule does this, the superintendent gets all the calculations ready and basically tells the LEA what they can claim. Then the LEA just has to claim it and then submit reimbursement after they've spent it. So I think most of the work would be on the USBE side, from my understanding of the process.
further follow-up, Mr. Hymas?
No, thank you. That's great. Not great that USBE has more work, but our LEAs do a lot. So I truly appreciate that.
Yeah, hear you. Is there any, just out of curiosity, Jennifer, you may not know this, but is there any auditing on the back end of this? Is it only if the legislature directs us to audit it? Would there be anything that would require LEAs to prove? I guess it's just through the reimbursement process that they use the money appropriately.
Yep, basically they'll submit their receipt of what they want to pay for a software. It's pretty open-ended of what software they choose for their English language learners. So as long as it's a software tool, it's okay in terms of we would approve it from a monitoring perspective. There is no requirement in legislation to monitor or audit, but obviously we want to make sure the funding is spent appropriately. And we've had this program for years in terms of the software's been around, I think, for maybe a decade. But previously it was a state contract, and that last year it went to not a state contract. LEAs could choose. They were using, I think 37 different software programs last year, and we expect a pretty good variety this coming year as well.
Thanks, that's helpful. Member Davis.
I hope I didn't miss this somewhere in the rule, but is there enough money for all of the English language learners to participate in this? Or is it first come, first served, and when the money runs out, no one else gets to participate?
Yeah, so for this, may I answer?
Please.
So for this one, it is a kind of base formula, and our base formula was considering different sizes of LEAs to ensure that they could at least get some software for their students. So this should afford any English learner in a district who the district chooses or charter chooses to purchase the software to have access. And that was the point of the base formula, knowing that there is some basic level of cost. If we didn't have the base formula previously, last year, we had to just give per pupil, and luckily the board approved for us to use some carry forward funds to give a base to allow each charter and district to be able to purchase software. And that is why we asked when they put this back in code for a base amount, and allowed us the flexibility to ensure that each student can have access if the district and charter chooses to leave this as an option.
And we didn't get
Follow
it
up,
posted
Chair.
up here. Can I add one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
We didn't get it posted up here, but they've already run the calculations of what this would look like for the upcoming year. So like with the base amount, even a school with just one student would get like $1,010 or something like that. But they have run those numbers, and hope maybe we can get those posted before this goes to full board, that just shows what the planned distribution is for the first year, so you can get a sense of how that looks. But every school with EL students would get a distribution under this or be entitled to it.
Great. Cindy, do you
Follow
have-
up? May I follow up?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, I did see those base amounts. Thank you. I was just wondering if they are enough, if the money is enough in those LEAs so that each, I assume that they need a license for each student. Isn't that how that works? Is that enough for each of our English language learners, or only a portion in each LEA would get to?
May I respond?
Please do.
So from us doing this last year, the LEAs were able to kind of work within the amount they were given, which was flexible, and the vendors kind of worked with them knowing what their amount was. So they were able to cover each student. As you can imagine, when we went from a state contract to no state contract, that left a lot of room in the game. And so vendors were great with working within the money that we had, and we expect that to continue. We didn't hear that they weren't able to cover all their students last year. So if that becomes an issue, we can definitely bring that back to the board in terms of making the request larger for this program or not. But at this time, we were able to kind of support the field adequately last year in this similar type of model.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. Does that completely answer your question? Thank you, Member Davis. If no one else has any other comments, I was asking for one rather minor change when we discussed this initially on Wednesday. It would be, I was looking for a date for this application. I'm a fan of putting in information that LEAs need in a rule and not having the application become the rule. So I was just asking Mr. Rasmussen if we could insert a date here, and LEA shall submit an application to the superintendent by November 1st. So LEAs are well aware of when they must request that money.
So Chair, that is draft 2 that I've now posted up on the screen. That includes that date. Staff suggested that based on the fact that that's usually the deadline that we give for LEAs who are going for grant money. That's pretty consistent with other grant applications they would submit. And that would also allow some flexibility to redistribute funds. If some LEAs didn't claim all of their money, there's a possibility we could re-divvy some of the extra out.
Thank you. Thank you. That makes me feel much better. I like having that in the rules. So can we, it's not a very big change, but the motion I would make is to add this date to line 29.
You can just move to adopt draft 2.
Okay, so we don't even need to specifically vote on that date is what you're thinking, or that amendment. Is that right? Okay. So whoever makes the motion, it would be just draft 2 as amended, or not even as amended, just draft 2 and forward to the board. All right. Would somebody like to make a motion? Thank you, Member Davis.
I move that the committee approve R277-930 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. And any further discussion to that motion? I see none. The motion is that the committee approve R277-930 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Would members please vote? I see that's happening faster than I can say it. And I also see that it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Great. We are to item 2.4, another a slightly amended rule. So would you discuss that? This was Jeff Van Holten. Is Jeff on, or is this something that you're taking over, Ben?
I am here.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And would you speak to R277-609?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs for the State Board. Glad to be here on this very last moments of the morning before it is noon and afternoon. R277-609 is a very quick amendment and a continuation. The rule is fastly approaching. It's a 5-year birthday, so we want to let the Office of Administrative Rules know that we'd like to keep it. So we'll need a motion to continue and then amend. And the amendments are just in response to House Bill 285 and 286. The juvenile justice section of code was recodified and renumbered this legislative session. And so I needed to go through the rule and find where we cite to those pieces of code and update the citations to what will be the new citation starting September 1st.
Line 222 and again in 224. So whoever's driving can scroll down if we want to see it actually in real time. There we go. So it's a new citation is the only reason for the amendment. Is that right, Jeff?
Correct. Yep. Those two on 222 and 224 that reference to 80-1 or 80-5.
Thank you.
Some of the new citations for juvenile justice codes.
And it still needs to be continued, and it also needs to be continued. Thank you. I just had this thought, and I'll just take the chair's prerogative and say, as I was reading this rule again in preparation for this meeting, it was good to see that much of the language that's in here is also with similar language that we used in the equity rule. So there'll be consistency from rule to rule, which Chair Hansen said he asked for you to do. So I really appreciate that. I think that helps in keeping our rules consistent, which if they're rules, they should be. So with that, Mr. Hymas, you had a question.
Yeah, can a member of our staff or even a board member, as this rule has been around for at least 5 years, can you share with us some of the outcomes of this rule?
Wow, good, very good.
Is that tricky? Yeah, I just, we have rules, and rules are fantastic, and we want to renew this rule. What I agree with this rule. Has it impacted our schools, and in what way?
Do we know that? Then I guess Jeff would be, maybe Angie would know something, could help him out in the with information if she has it. But Jeff, do you know anything about, have we gathered any data about this? Do you know what we, have we seen any, has discipline of students become more fair, more appropriate? I've heard a few things anecdotally that I'll pass on in a minute, but let's hear what Jeff might know more from data.
I do know that we obviously collect discipline data and vary forms of that data, but I would have to probably pass to Leah or Patty Norman or even Christy Walker. I'm not sure if she's on, but I do see Leah and Patty, and they might have a better sense of what the existing data is right now. Leah's hands up, so I think Dr. Voorhees is the best choice.
Voorhees, please help us.
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support.
I'm happy to speak to some of your question, Board Member Hymas, at least. So several of the results of this rule have been greater LEA, better LEA, maybe not greater, better LEA understanding of the requirements related to emergency safety interventions. We've, as a result of the discussion about this rule, and Chair Lear can speak to that because she participated in all of those committee meetings, which took us about a year, didn't it, Chair Lear, to pass this last time? Yes. And we had many stakeholder meetings, lots of stakeholder feedback, which was great, and discussed this rule extensively. And that was a really helpful process because in between each committee meeting, when we were discussing the rule, my staff and I would go back and talk to LEA staff members, talk to attorneys at the Disability Law Center, talk to parents at both the PTA and the Parent Center about how discipline plans, and specifically in the case of updating this rule a couple years ago, the emergency safety interventions processes were working and or not working for LEAs. So we had a great opportunity to provide technical assistance and some professional learning to LEA staff and stakeholders, parents and community members as a result. And that also gave us the opportunity to provide technical assistance about what Jeff was just talking about, data collection related to student discipline. As a result of that, we are actually updating our incident definitions for UTREC submissions. We are updating the least restrictive behavior intervention manual as a result of all of these conversations 2 years ago, and we're excited to be able to share that. And behavior supports and writing of discipline plans and emergency safety intervention committee work is the #1 request that we get from LEAs for professional learning in our TRP, in our training request portal that we've talked about in other committee meetings. So the discussion that the committee had 2 years ago for an entire year really made discipline plans and appropriate and least restrictive discipline a topic of conversation for LEAs, and the number of complaints that we have had, and the number of formal special education complaints, but also the number of hotlines.
Oh, Leah, you froze.
Leah, you may need to cut your video. I'll check.
Leah, can you hear us?
Chair Lear.
Yes.
Jeff had mentioned that because of the Red Air Day, a lot of the state agencies are working from home today, and this could be just a lot of stress on internet services today. Like a lot of people are having problems.
Well, if I could, I mean, I think she's answered the question. You may know this about me. I'm happy to repeal rules. I love to make things easier, and so I just want to make sure that if we have a rule, and if we are going to re-spark or bring that rule back into and hang on to that it's effective. And so it sounds like what Dr. Voorhees was sharing was we've got some good things happening as a result of this rule, and I'm happy to support those kinds of rules. So
thank you. I was going to turn the table back on you, Matt, and say, as a leader of an LEA, or of a school in an LEA, sort of, you're a little bit of a hybrid, but have you seen any differences in your disciplinary practices at your school because of this, or are you moving more to, and it's become such a cliche, but are you moving more to a restorative justice mindset, or are you doing anything different at your high school because of this?
I don't know if it's directly related to this rule, but we do look at our discipline processes each year, and we make sure that they are in line and fair. And we look at our reporting changes each year to make sure that we understand who is disciplined in and what kind of discipline is I hate to use the term fair here, but for students, but we keep an eye on all of these types of reporting to the state and what kind of discipline takes place. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like I said, I don't know. We don't sit down and study this rule directly, but we look at the discipline processes each year.
And do you have any anecdotal sense, even anecdotal, it might be more of if your disciplinary actions are increasing, are becoming more sort of serious or dramatic, or are they staying about the same, or do you have any sense of that?
I don't think that they are increasing. They are getting more. I mean, and this is just because of, I think, the world we live in, but we're seeing more like vaping, for example. But as far as discipline, I think it's pretty consistent, at least in the high school level where I am. And I know I see a lot in the junior high as well. We see more happening in the junior high than in the high school, but that's a maturity thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, each cohort of students brings their own challenges. So
Thank you. Thanks for that kind of view from the ground level, which we sometimes miss. Member Klein has a question.
Sure, I'd love to follow up with Matt. And you didn't say exactly what your school does. You said you don't study this rule. Are you doing something different than what's in this rule? You say it changes from year to year, but.
Well, and the reason I say that, let me pull this up real quick. The reason I say that is because I've never sat down and opened up this rule and said, hey, are we on par? As I read through this rule, I see that we are in line with this rule. So this could have the discipline process before I got to the school where I'm an LEA had already been set. So as far as, like I said, me personally sitting down and going through this rule and saying, okay, we're in line here. I haven't done that, but we have definitions, we have processes to go through any disciplinary problems that we may have. And honestly, that may look different. I know it looks different for the traditional public school. Each charter may look a little bit different, right? These rules that we provide here as the USBE are somewhat generalized, right? We don't tie the hands of LEAs and say you must. But we offer guidance. So anyway.
Good.
Just a follow-up question.
Go ahead now.
Or an additional question. I would like to know, what is being done in schools like Matt's that maybe do things differently if it's working, and have that as a comparison to what the rule is here. I'm also curious what initiated the creation of this rule.
And just coincidentally, Angie Stallings is raising her hand, so we'll let her speak to all of that and more.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I'd be happy to. And I am raising my hand. I was raising my hand for the purpose of letting everybody know that Dr. Voorhees is back in the room. I was just going to say a couple things to kind of finish out what she was saying, and then I'll answer your question if that's okay, Board Member Klein. So something that Dr. Voorhees was going to state is not only have they been providing more training as a result of this rule, There's been a model policy that was created and distributed to LEAs to support implementation of the rule. And I think what Dr. Voorhees was about to say, that is, as a result, the hotline calls from parents about, extreme discipline, I'll just label it as that, has gone down. As to the impetus for the rule, I actually, the big changes to this rule came right as I joined USBE back in 2015. And it was a call from the community of parents and families who support students with disabilities primarily, but also from other families to really be clear about what's appropriate as far as discipline. A lot of the discussion back in 2015 was about physical restraint, which is, certain, at the time there were issues across the country. Hopefully we didn't have any of these practices in Utah, but where students were being physically restrained, either with restraints like ties or some sort. Also, there were certain holds that were being done to students, and making sure that those holds were not being done in excess of 15 minutes, or if they were, or even if they were for 2 minutes, that parents were aware that students were being physically restrained or being put in these seclusionary rooms. That was a practice across the country, and there was a movement. There were students who unfortunately passed away because of those restraints or being put in rooms for excessive amounts of time. So that was the discussion back in 2015, where some of these excessive, or what I would call extreme, discipline practices. And then there was a bill, I believe, and Leah could correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it was either 2016 or 2017, prohibiting or requiring additional information about physical restraints. Again, a lot of this came from our disability community, but there was also a request for these protections to not only apply for students who have disabilities, but for all students. So that hopefully that background helps. It's really been from parents who've been asking for there to be better communication. A lot of the information in this rule requires calls to families before the student gets home and says, "Oh, mom, by the way, I was restrained today during school, or I was put into a seclusionary timeout room." That's what was happening before the rule happened, is there wasn't necessarily great communication between some of our LEAs and the parents. And now parents are required to be contacted when some of these practices occur. So hopefully that's helpful on some of the background. And, some of the examples that I shared were probably very extreme, and hopefully they don't occur in our LEAs. But there were at the time some national headlines and practices going on. And this was to ensure that there'd be training and supports for our LEAs so that they could handle and support our students who might be having or experiencing issues where there might be discipline.
And one other thing, and Natalie, I want to come back to you, but I think Representative Snow's restorative justice bill was another there's a lot in this particular rule. And that was another impetus for treating or disciplining students differently based on lower level offenses. And I think it had really uncertain feelings among some LEAs I was familiar with in the beginning, but I think that things have improved, and Angie could speak to that also. But from what I've heard, I think LEAs have become more comfortable with disciplining students consistent with the law that was passed in around 2017-18, and this rule that followed up on that. Member Klein, did you have other questions?
Yeah, I'm curious how it affects just the everyday classroom management, and if teachers if this ties their hands a little bit as far as being able to just deal with regular classroom management issues when they have to do things. I don't know if that falls under the least restrictive means, if they're able to deal with those things within the classroom in an effective way. I guess I'm coming from the perspective of, I've heard that there are more classroom management issues with the smaller things, not the extreme, or in teachers being able to report or send maybe a student to the office, or to get that extra help that they need to manage these issues, meaning kids may be figuring out that they can get away with a little bit more by way of misbehavior in the classroom. And there was a Dear Colleague letter that was put out some years ago by the Obama administration that asked for these kind of things to be implemented. And in Florida, in what is the name of the district down there where they had the mass shooting, Parkland, Florida. A lot of these restorative justice practices were put in place as a result of that Dear Colleague letter. And it ended, they sound really good on the surface. There's good intentions behind it, but when they actually dug down to what happened with this young man that did the massive shooting, there was all kinds of red flags before for lesser issues that or disciplinary issues for him that went unaddressed because they didn't want him to end up in the so-called school to prison pipeline. And so they overlooked a lot of things which made their data look good. They weren't getting the reports because the teachers weren't reporting things. There was a lot of extra paperwork involved if they wanted to, move towards the suspension or something along those more extreme lines. And as they looked back, there was so many steps out, points at which they could have taken more disciplinary measures that would have in the long run prevented the mass shooting. But because they were trying to take the least restrictive means for discipline, it just allowed this young man to continue to have issues until it, the shooting happened. And there was mass casualties. So I just want to be really careful that we're not setting things up for a situation like that.
Thank you. Leah came back. Thanks for rejoining us. Do you have something more to add or any response to that, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Zoom completely shut down there for me for a minute, so I'm on my phone, but I appreciate those comments. And as far as this rule is concerned, this rule does not tie the hands of teachers. What this rule does is require that LEAs have discipline plans and that they apply them consistently, and that they do report that information to the USBE. I completely understand the concern about classroom teachers, administrators, central office staff not wanting to report severe discipline issues because they're concerned that it makes their schools look dangerous. But that actually is a requirement, and we do actually follow up with schools. We have a process in place in which schools that do not report incidents, we follow up with the schools, and we actually increase their risk score related to monitoring if they don't report any data, because so that we can go and have a conversation with them and a discussion with them to make sure that they have the plan, that they're implementing the plan consistently, and that when discipline does apply, that they're reporting that to us. And that has improved the reporting in the last couple of years as a result of the reviews that data and statistics and program staff have done. But I would say no, that this particular rule does not tie teachers' hands. What it does is requires that there are LEA plans, and it gives parents in the community the opportunity to see those plans, to know what the plans are, what the discipline policy is, the student conduct policy, whatever the LEA calls it, that there is one, what it is, how the LEA and or school is going to respond to different types of behavior, and so there is consistency, and so that parents can rely on, well, this is what the LEA has said they are going to do, and this is what they actually did. And another thing that I was going to say when Zoom quit was another impetus for this particular rule was related to corporal punishment, and that statute still allows corporal punishment, but this rule does not. So that was also a key issue for the community, as Angie was talking about, the community bringing this particular rule to the forefront. Corporal punishment was one of those issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for adding that back on context. Member Davis.
I appreciate the clarifications that were given today. And I remember the last time we visited this rule, there were just a lot of, there was a lot of advocacy. There was a lot of input from the Utah Disability Law Center and other voices and lots of parents. And I appreciate kind of more the focus of communication on this rule. And with that, I have a motion, if that's okay, Chair.
Right. Let me just add, just again, taking maybe the chair's prerogative, and this might be interesting for Matt. One of the things that's referenced in this rule is a model discipline plan that LEAs can use, and I think sometimes we don't promote those kinds of resources that we have as much as we should. And I tracked it down, and I also wish sometimes they were a little easier to find, but Google does wonders. I tracked it down and reviewed it, and it is excellent, Matt. If your school is ever wondering or looking at updating your discipline plan, the model plan that's available online through the USBE, I looked at again, and I think that the staff has done a wonderful job of keeping it up to date, and might be helpful for you, not an added burden, but rather helpful in your school's review of your practices.
Carol, is that something you can share?
Yes.
Send out to us?
Yeah, and I don't know how to get those out to LEAs. I do agree that the USB has many model policies that should be readily available for, and I believe that they are, if LEAs kind of reach out, that we share with those. But I agree that sharing that with LEAs is fantastic.
Right.
Ours honestly fits perfectly within this rule here, and I think we have a great policy with our discipline, and so I hope that all LEAs, whether charter or traditional, have a solid plan in place where they can share it with parents and refer to it often.
Yeah, thank you. I'm saying that there are those resources available, and the only thing I'm suggesting is maybe we can do a better job at USBE of making those really obvious. Took me a little while to track it down. Angie, I thought, was making a note, and she will send it out, a link to it, to at least these committee members that might be interested. Right, Angie and or Ben?
Yeah, we can do that.
That'd be great. And then maybe look to where I couldn't find it readily. A little bit of an aside, but I think we have these great resources, and LEAs can use them rather than reinventing things for their own purposes if they want to. Thank you. Now I think we're ready for a motion. Member Davis.
I move that the committee continue and approve R277-609 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Any additional comment you would like to make to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, so the motion is the committee continue and approve R277-609 draft 1 on first reading, forward it to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, please vote. And I'm missing, who am I missing? Oh, there we have. We have everyone, and they were all in the affirmative. Thank you. And I didn't welcome, we had a future state board member from maybe 2038 who was visiting with Member Booth, and we did not acknowledge her. She was really cute to stay to listen to us for 5 minutes. So thank you so much for that, Randy. That bit of life, let me put it that way. Item 2.5 is our last action item, and that is about the State Instructional Materials Commission and a possible a discussion of the sunset provision. So that would be to Alan. Is Alan Griffin the one that I should turn to, Angie?
I'm going to start if that's okay, and then Al will go if that's all right.
Yes, please.
Thanks. So just as a reminder, yesterday I touched on this, that there's 5 sunset reviews that the Education Interim Committee meeting is going to be discussing in June and September. The Education Interim Committee requested that the State Board of Education provide a recommendation on each of those sunsets. You took action on one yesterday, which was to recommend that the Standards Review Committee continue. Today, we're going to be discussing, I apologize, the State Instructional Materials Commission. And there will be 3 others that will be assigned to the 3 different committees is our recommendation, but of course, subject to board leadership assignment. There will be the other 3 sunset reviews will be reviewed in committees in August. So this one today, again, is the State Instructional Materials Commission. As backup, you can see the document again. You don't need to pull it up, Ben, but it gives an overview of all 5 of the sunsets. You can see the background here, a little bit about the duties and membership, as well as the recommendation from staff to continue or to request that the legislature continue this commission, just as by way of legislative review. And then I'll ask the Chair Lear to turn the time to Alan Griffin. This committee was reviewed back in 2015, 2016, after it was provisionally sunset in order to have a review. But then back in 2010, you may remember the legislature had a huge monster of a bill that sunset almost all of the commissions and boards and advisory groups that the legislature had, and over a 3-year period. Last year, we looked at the USDB Advisory Council. You'll remember that. This commission was one of those that the legislature essentially sunset for the purpose of requiring the committee to look at it again and determine whether it's still needed. So that's the background for what the legislature is hoping from us. So Chair Lear, if you'd like to turn the time to Alan, he can explain, give a little bit of background and explain why staff recommend that the legislature maintain the commission.
Yes, love to hear from Alan Griffin. I just have to add a 2-sentence sort of historical context. When I started at the USBE in the 1980s, this was a huge library of materials, and there was a huge giveaway every year of books and textbooks, and things have dramatically changed, and I'm sure Alan will mention some of that. So Alan's the specialist at the USBE that has responsibility for this. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Alan Griffin, Curriculum Content Specialist at USBE. The Instructional Materials Commission has been carrying on a review of instructional materials basically since 1907, even though that was not the title of the commission at the time.
I wasn't around then, by the way. Okay.
Oh, I don't remember the exact name. I've got it in the archive somewhere. The responsibility of the commission is essentially to oversee the review of instructional materials that are sent to us from publishers and from others now. We even get them from the open education community, and provide recommendations, not mandates, but recommendations to schools and districts, the LEAs, to for the very best instructional materials, as well as to prohibit or warn against instructional materials that are not sufficient, that don't work well in a classroom. We have 5 lay citizens on the commission, as well as a dean of education, a principal of the high school or secondary education, a principal of elementary education, and 2 teachers, one from secondary and one from elementary. So it's a well-balanced commission. We hope that we get parental input from the 5 lay members. And they have done a remarkable job in the past of targeting materials that work well, and especially targeting those materials that are not appropriate for the classroom. It's been a long time going. We've made some improvements along the way. And the latest improvement in the past 2 years, we have contracted with the Midas Corporation to rewrite the database for instructional materials, and that is nearly complete. We expect it to be completely done in January. But in the meantime, it's made our reviews much more effective. We're getting better reviews. We're getting lots of teachers involved in a review of instructional materials. And so the Instructional Materials Commission is itself oversees, these committees of teachers that come in and review the materials from publishers throughout the nation, really. So that's the background. We're hoping that things will continue in that way.
Thanks, Alan. That's really helpful and helpfully succinct also. The board members, committee members, have any questions for Mr. Griffin about this rule and the support for continuing the commission as currently constituted? I see no hands. See no committee member hands for discussion. Member Booth. Randy, you need to unmute.
Thank you. I have a motion if you're ready for it.
We are so ready. Thank you.
I move that the committee recommends that the board recommends the legislature maintain the State Instructional Materials Commission in Utah Code and not allow the commission to sunset.
Perfect. Did you have anything you'd like to add to the motion?
I really appreciate the balance of the commission. I think we have all of the stakeholders that we need involved, and very grateful for the service they're providing and hope they can continue for many years to come.
Thanks. I agree. It's been a useful tool, I think, for educators. Member Davis, comment?
I'd like to speak for the motion, and in particular, just to thank Alan Griffin. Thanks for coming to our committee today. And, I've only been here for a couple of short years, but each time you have come to our board or our committee, I just appreciate your measured and thoughtful approach and the way that you represent, the Materials Commission and the good work that you do for our schools, so that, honestly, they don't have to keep recreating the wheel over and over and over. You do provide a great service that helps save some really important time for our folks, our boots on the ground. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You said that so well. So the motion is that, I said that, no, I didn't, that the committee recommends, that the board recommends the legislature maintain the State Instructional Materials Commission in Utah Code and not allow the commission to sunset. So that's the motion. I see no further hands. Will members please vote? And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. Thank you so much for that vote. And thank you, Alan, for being here, as Cindy said, and providing such a good explanation. And that it concludes our meeting. Not our personal best, but very close. So thank you so much for your participation and for the staff who supports us so ably. And have a great spring afternoon.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Angie.
Yes, board member Booth, she's adorable. What's her name?
Yeah, what is your name? Randy is still there? He may have gone away.
Oh, looks like it. All right, see you. Have a great day, Board Member Lear and others.
Oh, and Superintendent, thank you for being here or closing out.
Meeting. It's nice to be a listener, Chair Lear, and just realize time and time again how awesome our staff is and how hard our board works. So it's nice to just sit and watch.
Well, especially when it's kind of painless and slick, then I'm totally agreeing with you.
It was an hour meeting, not a half hour